Hi, everybody, and welcome into the Comics Lair. The ConTinual Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and their annual Heroes Convention. Tonight, we're discussing WandaVision as a show and, to the limited extent possible, as a superhero romance. And I will warn you up front, if you are watching this now and you have not seen WandaVision in its entirety, there are spoilers. You might want to wait and come back and watch this panel later because it's going to continue to be available because ConTinual is the con that never ends. So that said, I'm your host, Nancy Northcott, and I'd like to start by asking our panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their past experience with Wanda and the Vision. And Larry, let's start with you.
Oh, good. The minimalist guy. Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Martin. I'm an author and co-author, oftentimes with Gail Z. Martin. My experience with WandaVision is having watched the show and seen the Marvel movies, but I did not grow up with the comics because my mother wouldn't allow those in the house. So my experience is pretty much all from the media.
Okay, Nicole.
So my name is Nicole Gibbons-Carr, and I'm the publisher for Welcome and Mars Press. I'm also an author of science fiction and fantasy mysteries, as well as weird westerns. I fell in love with Wanda as a character reading House of M, back when she was in canon, the daughter of Magneto. So I spent a big bulk of the 90s reading X-Men comics, and so I was quite familiar with Wanda and her power. And of course, from seeing the Marvel movies and of course watching the Disney Plus show.
Okay, Jeannie.
Well, I of course love the show. I'm familiar with her from the Marvel movies and was only moderately familiar with her before that because I would steal my brother's comics and I liked the strong female characters, so I would read about her, but I didn't know that much more about her other than that she was super cool and had a great costume.
Alexandra.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian, and I write paranormal and contemporary romance, and I dabble occasionally in horror. And I'm like Larry. I did not even know about Scarlet Witch and Vision as characters until the Marvel movies. I know that's terrible, but I absolutely love them, and I always thought Paul Bettany was hot. So there we go.
Darren.
Darren Kennedy. I write these things, and Scarlet Witch has been one of my favorite characters in the Vision too, probably since about the early 80s. I used to read them in the Avengers run back in the 150s and 160s when George Perez was drawing them, and back in the day. And Vision and Scarlet Witch were very cool back then. Then a lot of the crossovers with the X-Men. I think I still have the original 4-issue Vision and Scarlet Witch, and then the second 12-issue Vision and Scarlet Witch issues in a box somewhere up there from back in the mid-'80s. Haven't read many comics in about the last 15 years or so, but I sort of kept up peripherally and definitely loved both of their portrayals in the Avengers movies, and WandaVision is wonderful. Sorry about the pun.
That's okay. And just have all the cards on the table. I've been reading comic books most of my life, and I read the Avengers for a while in the 80s, which is where I ran across the Vision and the Scarlet Witch initially, but I've always read more DC than Marvel, and I kind of drifted away from the Avengers and the X-Men in the 90s. And so really when I saw the movies, that was a whole fresh take for me because I hadn't read their adventures in the comics for a really long time. We originally got onto WandaVision in the Comics Lair because we did a panel a while back on romancing the superheroes. And so we decided not to talk about WandaVision because it was still running. The series wasn't complete yet, and we thought we'll just wait. Well, now the series is complete. And oh
my gosh.
Well, then you can start, Jeannie, and tell us how romantic you think WandaVision is or isn't.
Oh, I thought it was absolutely fabulously romantic. And by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I write these, as Darren would say, paranormal, romantic, suspense, and urban fantasy. I thought it was very romantic. I also thought that the way they showed her love and her grief was actually unique. I've not seen any other program handle that topic or handle it as gracefully as they did. Love and loss. Wow.
Darren, what about you?
I think it was quite romantic. One of the things, and I did not come up with this, I actually saw this on social media, but my day job is I'm a family physician, and in doing so, I handle a lot of things with grief, and grief has 5 stages, not necessarily in this order, but they are denial, anger, guilt, denial, guilt, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And if you watch the entire arc, it pretty much goes through 3 episodes of denial and the past things, and then anger whenever someone invades, and then bargaining when she's trying to figure out how can she keep everything, then depression whenever she's doing her Modern Family take and trying to figure everything out, and then in the end, acceptance, which I think is going to cause problems in the future.
Nicole, did you want to say something?
I mean, I think for me, just listening to Paul Bettany say Wanda is so amazingly romantic. I don't know, man. It's fantastic. And it's really great acting, right? Because you can actually, I actually believe that there was this synthetic person had a deep well of love for her, and she for him. And so, and so what is love, but what is grief but love persisting, right? So,
I was
so I definitely think that the whole series is about her loss, but you can't have that great a loss without first having that great deal of love. And so I think that is the poignant point of WandaVision outside the big story arc, and that makes it incredibly romantic that he bought this house for her, they're going to start this life together, and that is abruptly snatched from them. And so that is in of itself is a tragic love story, right? A la Romeo and Juliet, where they really love each other but just can't seem to get their happy ever after.
Larry, did you want to say anything else?
I don't have a lot to add other than somewhat of a compliment for the show, because I think it really gave you the feels. So you didn't really doubt the emotion, the grief, or the love between the couple. And I thought it interesting that when they start out, that they started in the idyllic family fantasy, that when she starts remembering or trying to bring him back, she goes back to her happy place, and that's where she puts him, and that's where they build. But yeah, I just thought the show did very good on the feels, so you didn't just see it, you experienced it as the episodes went on.
Alexandra?
Well, we were actually talking earlier today about what the definition of a romance was. And by definition, a romance is a story where if you can take the romance piece out, if the story falls apart, then it's a romance. If the story can stand without it, then it's not really a romance, it just has romantic elements. Well, WandaVision is very definitely a romance. If you take the romantic element out of that story, it completely falls apart. The entire plot hinges on the love between Wanda and Vision, and also the love that Wanda has for all of the people that she's lost. Because you really, I thought Wanda kind of had her arc in the first, phase of the Marvel movies. They never really showed how she's got Princess Leia syndrome. She literally loses everybody in her life. And so it's only natural that, Vision is the straw that broke the camel's back. So that was the thing I really loved about WandaVision, is it showed all of that stuff that you never usually get to see, that gets kind of glossed over in comic books a lot. Because, comic books, they're like how many pages? 20 pages or something. Nobody wants to waste some of that with, feelings, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a limited tolerance in a big segment of the comic book audience.
Mm-hmm.
Too much time spent on feelings.
Right.
I think.
Right.
But, it was interesting because Wanda in the comic books, back when I was reading in the 80s, her power was what Agatha referred to as a probability hex. She changed the probability of the outcome of any situation and was able to change it in a way that she wanted to direct. This Wanda is head and shoulders above probability hexes, like from the very beginning of this story. So how did you all see her growth arc? Darren, do you want to start?
I was just going to say it's going to be a little bit rough when they try to bring the X-Men in, because they've kind of powered Wanda up almost like a Jean Grey Phoenix type of character. I mean, snapping her fingers and making entire cities become something else. I mean, back in the day, that's something that Jean Grey might have done when she was fully phoenixed up, but that's not something more whenever Nicole was reading them. But when you and I were reading, Wanda back in the day, she would like make the thing fall over so that it would blast the person instead of blasting Vision or something like that. But it wasn't like, yeah, I'll snap my fingers and like rewrite reality. So they've definitely powered her up considerably from what I'm familiar with.
But when she was in House of M, she was very powerful. Like they had amped her up before. Yeah, so she could just, that was No More Mutants, and then there just suddenly weren't any, like ever, they're just gone. Like the X gene was just gone. And so I think that for Wanda I think they had already amped her up, but in WandaVision, I think too, some of it is fueled by grief, and they wanted to show you how much of that, it's like that whole fight or flight reflex. We get adrenaline, and you suddenly have mothers who are moving cars off their children and all these superhero, no pun intended, abilities because of some strong emotional connection. And so I think that they're trying to illustrate that by this boom in her power, right? With this grief at the loss of not just Vision, but her, her brother and her family. Mm-hmm. And also being like blipped for 5 years. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm just mad at everything.
Also, she never really had, at the beginning, not only was she do blasty, Ultron goes away, but she was doing all that like mind telepathy stuff. And that's also something that's never really been Scarlet Witch.
No, that's not been her. I agree.
That's again, more.
That's a Jean Grey. Yeah.
Kind of like the Jean Grey. And I'm like, well, we saw how that one worked out.
Hey, that's a whole other panel.
Unfortunately, I think the comics tend to direct any sort of love stories towards tragedy. But I totally agree with you, Nicole, that they really were illustrating the intensity that comes with grief. Because like you say, she's lost everybody, and she's lost the Avengers situation. That's all gone. So she's got all these piled up losses in her life, and suddenly she's not facing them. Wow. Gosh, don't we all recognize that and, relate to it? But I also think they show that she's still pretty OP when she's left that situation, because when at that end scene at the cabin,
yeah.
She's doing two things at once. She's in her Scarlet Witch persona studying, and she's making tea. So, I think they've made her pretty OP.
Yeah, if you are more powerful than Doctor Strange, you're pretty freaking powerful at this point, which I thought was strange, no pun intended. Then they thought they amped her up like that. So I was like, on the same level as Doctor Strange.
Well, in her first appearance, when she gets really mad, she literally just falls to her knees, and literally all of the Ultrons that they've been fighting for a long time that are really tough, they just disintegrate. Like that's like her first appearance. Yeah, I can disintegrate all these with a thought, and that's her starting level. That's like level 1 Wanda.
Yeah.
Well, just to kind of put it in, I guess if you're going to put it in Dungeons and Dragons terms, Doctor Strange is a wizard. He is learned. He has learned all of these things. Wanda has that, but then she's also a mutant as well that's giving her help with that. So I think I would think that the MCU is going to deal with them as two separate sorts of entities. You know what I mean? They're like two separate classes. Instead of, I mean, he's the Sorcerer Supreme. She's a friggin' mutant. I mean, you know, so naturally, I mean, he is still human.
Right.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I think they've also sort of set it up so that they've got a male magic user and a female magic user, so they can't be accused of gender disparity.
Right.
And so, you know, Doctor Strange is probably going to be doing his own thing, because he always did in the comics, no matter how like peripherally he was connected to some of the other storylines. It was always peripherally.
Yeah.
He was doing his thing.
Yeah.
And so I think his movies will be about his thing versus touching the other universe.
I'm sorry, Larry, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, the one thing I'd add more to the WandaVision series is how they displayed her power growth within those episodes, because at the beginning she was using a lot of power, but it was set up to be more subconscious. That yes, she had great power, but she wasn't knowingly doing this as an active participant. Her mind was doing it for her. And as the series goes on, you see it start to break down as reality invades. And I thought what was, at least to my internal dialogue, meaningful was as she gets towards the end and she has to accept the reality and that Vision was gone, and that she has the dialogue with the witch. That's when she starts to actively accept and use her powers, and it sort of blows up in literal terms that now she both has the power and she's using it. So she sort of goes to the next level once she's accepted and sort of dealt with the grief.
Well, I think, I mean, and you guys may have a different perspective on this, but Wanda, to me, has always, I mean, from her first appearance in the MCU, has been all about, she's always been very passive. She's never really taken control of her own power. I mean, the whole big deal that starts Civil War is she blows up the side of the building and hurts all of these people because she can't control her power. I mean, she can, but she can't, you know. It's almost like it's too much for her. By the end of WandaVision, like Larry said, she has learned to harness that power and control it and use it for what she wants instead of her power. She is acting on her power instead of her power acting upon her, if that makes sense.
Well, and that was interesting too, because Agatha said something like this: the Scarlet Witch is, I'm blanking on whether it's born, not
chaos
born.
magic, right? Is
Yeah,
it
chaos
born?
magic. Yeah.
So it's a unique phenomenon. It's not usual for witches. And then at the end, they formed the Scarlet Witch headdress, which, you know, I don't know who designed that back in the 60s or 70s or whenever, but now it's a magical headdress instead of like the one she's wearing in the cartoon episode. And that seemed kind of symbolic of her otherness now, because when she uses all this magic, she just has this headdress now.
If you noticed, all the witches in the scene from the past with Agatha, when they were doing their thing, they also developed very similar headdresses that were white, and so hers is red. And so I think that is supposed to be, in the MCU at least, this is a thing that witches have, and hers is red instead of white. And Agatha's would have been that, I guess, dark purple if she ever actually made one.
Well, since we're talking about Agatha, what did you all think about her? Alexandra, do you want to start?
I like her. I hated the way that actress played that character. And, you know, and I watched it in a group with other people, and we all kind of had that same thought. It's like, I get it. Agatha's character through the whole thing, she was like the nosy neighbor. She was like, you know, she was playing that annoying character. Well, when she became Agatha the witch, she was still doing that. And it's like, okay, it's very hard to be menacing when you're doing the same thing that you were doing back in episode 1 when you were, you know, popping over and Wanda was trying to keep you from seeing or doing all the things. I thought that was a bad choice on that actress's part. But I mean, I like the character of Agatha. I think she's pretty cool. I'm curious to see if we're going to see any more of her or if that's the end for her.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know the comics, so.
Well, in the comics, Agatha was one of the oldest witches in the world. And she was governess to Franklin Richards. For anybody who's not a Fantastic Four fan, Franklin was the son of Sue and Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. And she was also at some point a tutor to the Scarlet Witch. I don't really know much more than that. I just kind of took a quick look at Marvel.com because I knew we were going to do this. But does anybody else have anything to add about Agatha?
She's not a bad guy in the comics. She's
No.
ambiguous at worst, but she's actually usually a force for good. And she's almost like a surrogate mother / grandmother for Wanda and taught her everything she knows about being a witch. Because in the comics, she was basically a mutant. And Agatha says, you need to learn witchcraft. And she's not born to be the Scarlet Witch in the comics. She just learns witchcraft and then uses that with her mutantness and then becomes Nicole's, no more mutants, poof, and can do whatever she wants because she's got 2 big magical batteries going for her.
Magical batteries. I definitely liked Agatha's character. I thought her over-the-top performance was intentional, right? It's kind of
I thought it was intentional.
a viper. It's like a viper amongst the grass. But I didn't think she was a villainess. That was the part that I didn't think. So, and I still don't see her as the villainess. I think the FBI guy, the guy with sword.
Yeah, the sword guy. Yeah.
The sword guy. Not Randall Parks. The sword guy. Whose name I can't remember because generic white. Okay.
Haywood.
Yeah. He was the quote big bad for her. If you had a big bad other than grief, right? But I didn't think Agatha was a direct antagonist. She looked more like a foil to me in the way that Draco is a foil to Harry, but the big bad is Voldemort. And so I didn't see her as being, an evil witch. Because even in the flashback scene with Agatha, she's begging them that she didn't do anything wrong, that these are the things just come to her, right? And she's definitely pleading with her mom. She's pleading with them, and they just have like no mercy. So I don't think she's a bad person. Sure, she wanted to know what Wanda was, and she wanted some of the power that Wanda had. But I don't think she was the big bad of this series. I think grief and that guy whose name I don't want to attach any importance to.
That guy whose name I don't remember.
Who I refuse to remember because he's like nobody important to me. Was the quote big bad, right?
I think Agatha was disingenuous when she was pleading to the witches in the circle. I think she really was just saying, "Oh, don't hurt me," to get them to stop so that she could continue to do what she was doing.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that I don't think she's the big bad here. I think she just wants the power, and these are the ways she knows to get it. And so, Wanda doesn't know what she's doing, so she might as well figure out how to steal Wanda's power. I liked Catherine Hahn's performance because it was over the top as the nosy neighbor, and it was so sitcom-y. And to me, that fit in. It was almost like I forget what the character is in Roseanne that's like that, the sitcom Roseanne. And there's several like that where she just really pulled that characterization in. And I thought she managed to do it really well. I as someone who studied a lot of witchcraft, I really I have questions. I have so many questions. But most of them I would like to ask Agatha. Where did that book come from? And how did Scarlet Witch get it? And I thought it was so clever that they had Scarlet Witch Wanda turn the runes against her. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, clever girl. Well done.
Mhm.
Anybody else want to weigh in on Agatha?
Larry?
I don't really have a lot to add because I didn't have any of the comic backgrounds. So from my perspective, sort of like Alexandra said, I was a little confused because she wasn't really the villain of the show, and the change, it just honestly more confused me than anything because she didn't strike me as terrifying. Um, Perhaps the most I got out of it is very self-serving in what she did, and not really a appropriate adversary for someone of Wanda's power once she figured out what she was doing. But again, I don't have the background on how she's been in the other comics or what her role was, so I can only go by what I saw in WandaVision.
I was going to say, I think that everything Agatha did was a deception, including her theme song. She's like, it was Agatha all along. No, it wasn't. It was Wanda all along. And I think even in her own theme song, she's trying to cast doubt with, I'm the big bad. I'm the one that's been messing with everything. I'm like, no, the hex is Wanda. And you're just a little interloper trying to like horn in and like get a piece of the action. But no, it was Wanda all along. And she's going to show you exactly who it was all along in the last scene when she makes you the nosy neighbor that you pretended to be. I loved her performance. I thought it was great. I thought she played the not correct. I thought she played well the nosy neighbor of each different decade. I remember those characters on those shows, especially whenever in the 80s when she had on the leg warmers. I was like, I don't know what show that was. Probably one of the side characters on Growing Pains or something. Like that character is an actual character she researched. And then while we're talking about big bads, I actually was going to circle around to the sword guy because I'm like, I'm evil, I'm bad because I have lied and said that the Vision was gone whenever I've just had his body the whole time. And then all of a sudden he's pulling a gun and shooting at kids. And I'm like, what is happening? And I know that they did that specifically so that Photon could demonstrate her powers and get her first, maybe not first, but like third big super heroic ability check that you could actually see what she could do. But I was like, evil guy who is like trying to make a technological weapon so he can make himself rich. And I think I'll murder those kids. Like, dude, you went full Anakin in like 5 seconds. What in the world are you doing? Great job giving Photon an origin, but
it definitely felt shoehorned in. And out of the many scenes in WandaVision, I agree with Darren. That felt the most inauthentic. Like it just didn't feel authentic. It felt like they just, oh crap, we need to do something with Monica. Let's stick her in right here. It just seemed a bit.
Like the Vision was about to attack him, and then he was going to shoot. But then it's not as much of a heroic moment because I'm saving kids. I'm like, but why are you having to save kids from a guy who's basically a self-serving government agent? I'm going to shoot at him. What? And so I agree. That was the one that I thought was really out of character and strange.
Well, and
I thought Monica was very underused.
Yeah.
I think that's a great character, and she played it. That actress played it so well. And I'm like, and I don't know if it's just that they ran out of time or they weren't very smart and efficient with their writing. I don't know, but they didn't give her enough to do. I didn't think.
Well, I guess they're just trying to set her up for next or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought they could have had 1 or 2 more shows where they really focused on like the Jimmy Woo character and the astrophysicist character.
Darcy!
Yeah, and Photon's character, Monica's character, because and Hayward too. If they'd had 2 more episodes that really focused more on what those 3 or 4 characters were doing and sort of made them a little more 3-dimensional, I think it would have informed the WandaVision part even more, and opened up doors to other avenues in ways that I mean, yes, they've opened those doors, and that's kind of like you said, like everybody said, the introduction to these characters. Here's what we're gonna, we're gonna do something with them later. Psst, we're gonna do something with them later. But I think they could have made them more three-dimensional if they'd have just given them a little more time.
I know a secret on that one. That's a problem with the situation of 2020 that shall not be named. There were going to be 10 episodes, and I think episode 9 was the rabbit in the basement turns into a full-fledged demon, which is Jimmy Woo and Darcy and maybe Photon trying to quell Mr. Scratchy, Senior Scratchy. And that was all going to happen. And then 2020 happened right in the middle of filming, and it all got shut down. And when they brought it back around, they had to do what they did. We were going to get Senior Scratchy go full demon in the basement. and just the thought of Darcy and Jimmy Woo running from a demon rabbit is I desperately want to see this. Why did that not? But it did not.
Okay, so I have to confess, I'm super glad to know that, because that was one of those hanging threads to me. I'm like, what was up with the rabbit? So
I think
too,
Darren? Like Darcy and Jimmy Woo's character, they've had multiple movies, right, where you've seen them. Like you've seen Johnny Woo's character in the Ant-Man 2, right? And you've seen Darcy with Thor through 3 movies or 2 movies. Right. What you haven't seen was Monica. And I definitely think that she could have gotten a little more screen time.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen a kid version of Monica, right, in Captain Marvel, but you haven't seen her as an adult, after the blip, who's also dealing with her own grief, which is, again, runs parallel with Wanda's grief. And she does try to make those connections with Wanda. Like, I've lost someone that I loved a great deal, too. But I definitely think that could have been beefed up a little bit and could have given her a lot more, like even at the end, talk about things that felt inauthentic. When she looks at Wanda and says, if I had your power, I would have done the same thing. No, she wouldn't. And so I really don't believe that Monica would have done the same thing that Wanda did if she had Wanda's powers. Because she hasn't experienced the sheer volume of loss that Wanda has. And so that felt inauthentic to me. I was like,
I don't know. I had the experience of watching this show in the middle of a grieving process. And I'll tell you, that part actually rang more true with me than Vision's line, because I absolutely, if I had that power, I would totally have done the exact same thing to get my dad back. Absolutely. But that's just me.
I also think Monica would have said anything in that moment to make the person that she knew very well could disintegrate the entire state of New Jersey to leave peacefully. What can I say to a woman who can disintegrate all of us with the snap of her fingers? 4 stories ago, before she got her new powers, not kill us all right now. Because she literally just chokified the entire town with the snap.
I saw that. Yeah. So I didn't think that. Yeah.
You got to make her go.
I don't agree with the arguments that she just let Wanda leave. Yeah, she let Wanda leave, but she's not going to stop Darth Vader in red leave. You're not going to stop her. So what are you going to say? So of course she's going to let her walk off. She's an Avenger.
If The Rock walks into my house and raids my refrigerator and then takes all my food and walks out the door, I'm like, if I was as tough as you, I'd do that too. The Rock.
Joy.
Larry, did you wait?
Cashews, my friend.
Larry,
I didn't really have anything to add to that one. I do think it's interesting how, because I actually, and for others who haven't, go back and start watching the Marvel in order. It helps fill in pieces if you aren't intimately familiar, because one of the things I enjoyed was seeing Captain Marvel and seeing Monica and seeing the relationship. And then it just put things back into order, that some of the references in the comments just made so much more sense when it was fresh. Or seeing Darcy in the original Thor, and it's like, oh, she shows up again.
Well, as I was watching that last walk, Wanda goes back to the house. She's at the house with Vision. when the spell wave recedes and everything goes back to normal and their house is gone and she's standing there by herself like she was when she first came to town. Her car is in the driveway. Instead of taking her car, she walks through town past all these people who are really not happy with her so she can speak to Monica, and then she leaves. Why do you think that was?
No idea. But that was another one of those hanging threads where I'm thinking, if that's a rental car, somebody's going to be pissed. That's the rabbit and the rental car. Those were the two things that were just like in my brain. Now, I understand that there is also a making of behind the scenes look. And so I want to go see that, but I didn't want to do that before I did this panel. But yeah, that seemed slightly contrived to me.
I was going to say, I think that if you look at all the Avengers, they're always driving a BMW or an Audi or something. And here she is in this little red Buick, and she's going to have this idyllic New Jersey suburban housewife life with her little red Buick and everything. And I didn't catch it the first time through, but the Buick changes to be a decade appropriate Buick throughout the entire series. That was funny. I caught it the second time through, but I think I'm leaving behind the little house that I never got to have, and I'm leaving behind my little Buick soccer mom car, and I'm going to go be something completely different. I think it's symbolic of leaving all of that behind and just walking away from a storytelling perspective. And
well, I think the other thing it did was it underscored the ramifications of what she did to the people of the town. That it didn't just all go back to completely normal. Those people still experienced that her actions had consequences that she had to walk through and see and feel.
Well, skipping back to character development for a second. Those first 3 episodes that are almost entirely black and white versions of 20th century sitcoms were only about WandaVision and their life. How did you feel about that as you were going through and watching it? Alexandra, you want to start us off?
I don't know. Everybody like really ragged on the first couple of episodes. They were like, oh, it's boring. What's going on? I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. I really liked those 3 episodes because it wasn't so superhero-y. And it also had the same feel. Is anybody else a Twin Peaks fan? Anybody else like Twin Peaks? Just me? Okay. If you've never seen Twin Peaks, it's the whole show is basically about a normal small town that's actually filled with crazy perverts. And so everything is like slightly off. And I really liked that about those first 3 episodes, because it was about Wanda and Vision and their life together and everything, but there were little slightly off things in each episode. I think my favorite one was the episode where they're doing the magic show, and she's talking to the snotty lady, and then all of a sudden the radio comes on, and I loved that. I thought that was amazing, because you know it's like you've got the Mary Tyler Moore show, but then just this weird little foreboding thing happens, and then it kind of goes back to normal. And I thought that was really awesome. I liked those 3 episodes. I didn't think they were boring at all.
It's very Twilight Zone in tone and atmosphere, that it looks ordinary, but things are just, as Alexandra said, off. The beekeeper, right? The red helicopter that's red while everything else is black and white, and she recognizes that it's not black and white like everything else, which is in of itself, like she knows that something is just slightly off. And so that subversiveness, that sense of suspense beneath the veneer of a happy family, you know that something just isn't right. And that level of suspense and tension, to be able to carry that over 3 episodes, was very clever.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything to add to that?
Well, and I think this, yeah. For me, what I noticed was because it was episodic. When I first watched the first couple episodes, I went to my kids and I said, okay, am I missing something here? And they said, just keep watching. So for me, while I really enjoyed the episodes, I didn't understand it. And the way my brain thinks, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is this? Where are they going? What are they doing? I'm not getting it. So when you got to the third episode and you started seeing the peak of the outside world, then it all fell into a place. And what I'd say is, for me, if it had been a movie, I wouldn't have ever had those doubts because I would have just watched the art go through and I wouldn't have considered it as episodic and saw them as separate. So trying to make judgments, if you take a movie and you break it down and you say, I'm going to decide how I'd rate this movie after the first 30 minutes, there aren't many that are going to hold up. So I think that it does that well in an episode is pretty great. But as I said, I appreciated them much more the later I got into the series. And then I could look back and say, okay, now I see things that I can appreciate and understand that I missed the first time I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like in episode 4, when Monica goes and sends the drone in, and then they send the guy we think is the beekeeper in. Although, did we ever actually find out what happened to him? I mean,
No.
I think he might
think
get
so.
one of those dangling ends that maybe would
I
have
thought he
been.
got assimilated.
Yeah, well, probably, you would think. But yeah, but that's when it started to click for me. In the 4th episode, when we were going back through looking at it from Monica's perspective, because the radio bits were weird, but I think a lot of people bring an expectation into a superhero show. I certainly do. I plead guilty to that. And so there was not a lot of superheroing going on. So it's kind of like, what is this? Are we going somewhere with this? And I didn't have Larry's advantage of offspring who had seen it and could tell me to be patient. So what did you all think of when Agatha came through? It seemed to me that Agatha had 2 purposes in the story. One was to take us on a tour of Wanda's backstory without saying, here's Wanda's backstory. And so we saw it instead of being told it. And then she provided the superhero movie obligatory giant CGI battle at the end, and also forced Wanda into the full depth of her power. And so that seemed to me to be the main purpose of Agatha in the story, was, aside from being an annoying sitcom neighbor. But what did you all think of the changing the sitcom era every episode?
I loved that. I absolutely loved that. That was one of my favorite things. Like Darren was saying, it was very much like, you were sitting there watching it going, oh, I remember that show. Oh, I remember that show. Particularly the one that was, oh my God, it was Family Ties. It was Family Ties. And I just thought that was so much fun. The nostalgia of that. And my parents were older. I remember being the kid in my class whose parents were really old. And so they watched all of the Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore and all that stuff. I mean, those were shows from when they were kids, and we watched those shows too because of that. Everybody had Nick at Night. So yeah, that was really cool seeing those. I liked that part.
I liked that too. I mean, I remember thinking as I'm watching, going, same sort of thing. So that's Family Ties, or that's Brady Bunch, or that's there was even a little bit of the My 3 Sons in there, and some of those other things where I could recognize, that sort of little kitschy thing, like the kitchen decor with the Jello molds. I'm like, that's from My 3 Sons, and
Yeah.
just some of those little references. I thought that was super cool because I think it connected, those of us who grew up in the 80s, 70s, and 80s with kind of the shows we grew up with, to people who are growing up now, That's kind of a
It
cool
also provided that stark contrast, because all of those 80s, particularly the 70s and 80s sitcoms, are very formulaic. The each episode had a particular, you would have a particular arc that went through on every single episode. And so you would kind of expect that. Your brain automatically does that, automatically goes there. So when something out of the ordinary happens, like the thing with the radio, it adds to that sense of foreboding, because wait a minute, you just stepped outside the formula.
Well, when the twins are born,
Darren.
what?
Darren's been trying to get a word in edgewise
Go
for a
ahead, Darren.
while.
Thanks.
A lot of people that I talked to said, I think they could have compressed the first 3 episodes. And I'm like, why would you do that? Because the whole point of the show is that Wanda has turned her life into a sitcom. And if you didn't, I would have hated if we could have binged this thing. That would have completely done it, because the fact that you had to wait for sitcoms, just like you did when you were growing up, that was the whole point of the show. And compressing those and going, oh, here she is in the 50s, 60s, 70s in like 1/2 hour. I'm like, that's exactly what you don't want to do. And then I just wanted to put in a plug for my 2 favorite sitcom moments. Number 1, I didn't pick up on this, but I read an article where the very first line from the entire thing is where she hits him in the head with a plate and say, oh, look, my husband with his indestructible head. And I didn't think about it at the time, but what would she want? She wants Thanos to not be able to rip his head off like he did. I was like, the first thing she says is, I am making you not die by Thanos' hand. That's the first line of the show. That's brilliant writing, because you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And then,
Yep.
but my single favorite, I think my favorite moment of the entire thing is when Wanda is done arguing with the Vision at the end of episode 3, and she tries to run the credits on him, and he keeps on yelling, even though she's trying to run the credits. I thought that was, she's like, I'm done. And she runs the credits, and the Vision just follows her and says, no, this episode isn't over. I thought that was the best moment of the entire, that was just brilliant in my opinion.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, the other thing I'd add is I think from the psychology of her creating this world, the concept of using something that she saw as a child was really effective, and something that most people can identify when you talk about going to your happy place or a comfort food or a comfort TV show. You go back to a time or when things were good and you felt safe. And I thought they really played that up. And so it fit with where she was and what she was dealing with. And I thought that part was brilliant.
Yeah. And I thought it too, that one of the things that was sort of one of those pivot points is you see her breaking, you see it sort of break for her when Pietro shows up at the door. And the sitcom sort of suddenly, she suddenly doesn't know what to do with it. And that to me was one of those pivot points where you're like, okay, now things are going to be really different, because she did not expect that. And I went into it watching it thinking this was, I had no idea that Agatha was going to be a player in any of this. I thought in a typical sitcom, she was just the nosy, annoying neighbor that was a foil. And so I never saw that. I didn't see that coming. And so when Pietro shows up, I'm like, holy shit, what is she doing with it? So for the sitcom things, I just thought that was really, like Larry said, such a perfect view into her grief and into her, essentially her mania in this scenario, where she's trying to just cope. And that just threw her so for a loop. And I thought that was wonderful.
Well, they handled it. Did you notice they said, and you recast Pietro?
Yeah. Darcy.
Yes, I thought that was so clever.
Yeah. Darcy, she nailed that.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So what was your favorite part of the show?
Oh. That's hard.
That's very hard.
I gotta say, I think for me, my favorite part of the show was the episode where she's pregnant. And suddenly she's really pregnant. And then they have the doctor there, and then he's going on vacation, but he can't go on vacation. And it's like, and then they, suddenly they're babies and they won't sleep. And then they're, toddlers. I just thought that was hysterical. I was laughing as if it were a sitcom.
I mean, that's how it is in the soap operas, right? One week they're like 5, and you come back 2 weeks later, they're 25 and dating your sister. I mean, what just happened?
Or walking through, I'm like,
Marlena's still 35.
Yes.
Right.
Well, the mom is still the same age. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm still 35. How did you do that? Your daughter's older than you.
Yeah. That's soap opera magic right there. Not chaos magic, soap opera magic.
yeah. So that was my favorite, was the stork walking through, and she's going like, get out.
She can't get rid of it.
Other than my 2 sitcom moments, I think Wanda turning the runes on her and Vision versus Vision having their final fight being a philosophical debate are probably my 2 favorite moments.
Well, and the ship of Theseus thing is not your typical giant comic book CGI massive battle.
No.
And as I was watching, I was sitting there thinking, well, at what point does it not become the ship of Theseus? I mean, does it become not the ship anymore? And I was sort of sidetracked thinking about that, as well as watching to see what was going to happen with the Vision. Aside from the little loose ends that we discussed, was there anything in particular that you didn't find especially worked for you?
Well, I've already talked about, okay, so one of my favorite parts that Jeannie and Darren didn't say was Monica's walk back through the hex and her like coming into her power, and the flashback scene and her still like pushing through anyway, this great resistance that she's getting from the hex. She's still plowing through it regardless. And all I was thinking about historically how Black women have always faced some great challenge, and regardless of the bouncing of the difficulties in front of us, we've always managed to continue to push through. And once we get on the other side of that, we are forever changed. And so I saw that, I thought that was excellent, that she was thinking about the words of her mother, that she was thinking about her childhood, that she was reaffirming who Monica Rambeau was, in that even though she's changing, she's also anchoring herself as she moves through the hex. And that was really powerful for me as a viewer. And I was very excited to see that. That's probably one of my most favorite moments from this series. But one of the things, like I said earlier, didn't work for me was just the handling of Monica at the end in the episode 9. And it felt rushed. It felt inauthentic to me. I felt like, and there's an article that someone wrote about how how they did a disservice to Monica in that last episode. But I'm very excited to see what happens with the next movie she's in, next Captain Marvel movie she's in.
Okay. Anybody else have anything that you would like to add?
Bang bang at the kids doesn't work for me. It's kind of out of left field. And I'm still trying to figure out why the Sorcerer Supreme didn't feel like it was important enough to go figure out why there was a several-mile hex around a town in New Jersey and come at least, hey, what's going on over here? But we also have a movie where Batman and Superman live in 2 cities that you can literally look at the other one with binoculars and they never met before. So sometimes things just don't make much sense. But you would think would have said.
I have a theory. I actually have a theory about that. I think that was one of those things that got disrupted because there was all of this talk about how, Doctor Strange was going to be in WandaVision. And being a Doctor Strange person, I was really pissed that Doctor Strange wasn't in WandaVision. And but I really think that there was going to be something there. And then that was one of the things that they had to cut out. That disease that shall not be named. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say,
okay.
if Agatha can smell the raw meat, I'm not sure why Stephen Strange can.
Raw meat.
There's magic over there. I want some of that. Meanwhile, Dr. Strange is like, I am meditating. I'm like, whatever, Steve.
He could have been off-world handling something else too. You never
Yeah.
know.
Maybe he was having sushi with Wong.
That's right.
He was dealing with an interdimensional demon.
Yeah, I think sometimes it carries over to comic book movies from comic books, which is, well, we have another hero out there who could deal with this like in 15 minutes, but our story is over if this hero comes. So we're just going to not acknowledge the existence of this hero for the length of this book. No one will call this hero for help,
Right.
you know?
Right. Like kind of how the Eagles could have taken the ring to Mount
Yes.
Doom, just like that. Yeah.
Yes.
After they ended Barry Allen on the CW, every single time there was something going on Arrow, I was like, hey, Ollie, don't you have Barry on speed dial? I was like, snap, I'm in. I took care of it. I'm out.
I'm out. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they do that sort of thing, but I think we're coming up on time. So is there anything anybody would like to add before we close it out? Yep.
I think all the other Marvel TV shows are going to have a pretty high bar. The rest of them are definitely going to do well on the superhero-y stuff. But as far as like the feels, like Larry said, they got a pretty high bar now because I had all the feels.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything?
Darren stole what I was going to say.
I said nothing. I want to hear what Jeannie has to say.
No, I just think that's absolutely, they've just set the bar high, just real high.
It wasn't going to be the first show. It was going to be Falcon and Winter Soldier first, but the disease who shall not be named, the Voldemort disease. Oh my gosh, now I said Voldemort. It was going to be.
Oh no.
I think it was going to be Falcon, Winter Soldier, then Loki, then that, and then maybe that, because they wanted that to lead right into the new Doctor Strange movie, which wasn't going to be in. But now it's going to be like a year and a half between WandaVision and the new Doctor Strange, and that wasn't how they planned it. But they had to do what they could do with when the shows got done, so they could put them on Disney, so they can make money. So we'll see what happens.
I definitely think that one of the things Marvel does well with movies is that they're not all the same. They have superheroes in them, but they're not the same movie. They're not superhero movies. They're movies with superheroes in them. One's a fantasy, one's a action adventure, one's a political thriller. Like they're all different kinds, but they just happen to have superheroes in them. And I expect the same with their TV shows.
It also means you can
Yeah,
go
because
back and
I've
do a
heard
rewatch
Falcon
in
and Winter
order.
Soldier.
What?
What was that?
You were both talking at the same time. What?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I
Larry?
just said it means you can come back and do a rewatch in order.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What Alexander?
Alexandra, what were you gonna?
Oh hell, I don't know. What was I saying?
I think you were
saying?
talking
I don't
You
even
said
remember
something
now.
about Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Oh yeah, well because I've heard that Falcon and Winter Soldier is like much more in the Marvel movie vein. You know, it's very, it's very actiony. You know, running, jumping, punching people.
It's
Sort of
their
thing. I
buddy
have
cop.
not started watching it yet.
Yes,
So-
I have. It's their buddy cop movie. I mean, series. It's their, from the 80s, they're your Eddie Murphy and some generic white guy movie.
Well, on that note, why don't we wind this up? Thank you, everyone, for being with me tonight and making us have this lovely discussion, or allowing us to have this lovely discussion, I should say. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find, and their annual Heroes Convention. For more information about the store and the convention, you can visit www.heroesonline.com.